So I guess in this session, effectively, I think Microsoft Modern Commerce is a bit of a confusing title. It doesn't really explain what it is. But what we mean by modern commerce is our digital transformation of our programs. So effectively how our partners transact through our agreements and also how our customers transact. So I'm going to go through that digital transformation strategy, what we're effectively doing to our programs, where we see the partners sitting, and then also I'm going to touch on in the second half what the customer agreement is and how you guys can now play a part in that, because it's not just an LSP-led motion anymore. The LSP terminology is going. Cool. So just for perspective of who I am, I'm Ciaran Warner. I'm the UK Commercial Licensing Channel Activation Lead. It's a bit of a mouthful. Effectively, it's my job to land this strategy in the UK with our channel space. So I'm responsible for making sure that this process lands and also that we're doing the right readiness training sessions. So if you've ever joined something like a CSP Spotlight call, my team run those. Licensing update calls, again, that's my team. And any of the boot camps that you might have attended at TVP or external venues, again, my team do those. So I'm responsible for landing this strategy. So I guess the first question is, I think a lot of this slide's pretty obvious in terms of why we need to digitally transform, but I think it's fair to say that in the 30 years that we've been doing licensing agreements, since the EA to now, there's been a lot of changes in the market. Customers now expect to be able to buy and have that software immediately. They don't expect to be going through long processes to get those. They also don't expect to be doing it all paper-based. They expect to have a digital experience which allows them to get the software they want so they can start consuming it immediately rather than going through these lengthy processes. And part of that is actually digitally transforming the experience. So basing it more of portals rather than teams that we have sat either in Dublin or in the TVP office. So I think it's fair to say we've been through quite a large journey in terms of licensing agreements. So just to paint the picture of how many agreements we really have, we started off 25 years ago with customers saying that they didn't actually want to buy boxes anymore, because if anyone remembers the box products, you used to have to actually store every single box of every device you're using. So if you think when an organisation starts using thousands of PCs, that becomes quite a headache, having a cupboard where you're storing all these boxes. So we introduced the Select Plus agreement. Customers then said that if I'm prepared to commit, I should be getting a different pricing, I should get better pricing for doing that, rightly so we launched the Enterprise Agreement. They then said, but actually, we're a smaller organisation that wants to commit to a smaller amount, not a larger amount, so we introduced the Open and Open Value Company-wide Agreement. Then customers said they didn't want to own the assets, so this is when subscriptions started to play a big part in the market. So what do? We launched 2 more programs, Open Value Subscription, Enterprise Subscription Agreement. You can probably see the pattern here and where this is going. Education customers said they wanted exactly the same options, so we launched the same for all of the academic customers. Government said they wanted their own offers, so we launched the same for all the government organisations. You guessed it, non-profits said they wanted their own offers as well. They wanted their own pricing, so we launched the same amount of offers for them. Customers then started to purchase online services and said, actually, I want to commit to some on-prem products, I want to own the entitlement, but then I want to start using this hybrid environment, this hybrid world. So we introduced the MPSA, which was meant to be the answer to all of these problems with these agreements, and it turned out it wasn't. It was based off the same written process. Customers said they wanted to then commit to server products rather than commit to desktop enrollment products like the Enterprise Agreement, but they wanted to buy that alongside Azure, so we launched the Server Cloud Enrollment Program. They then wanted to buy direct for our website like AWS, so we launched the MOSA program, which is our Web Direct program. And then customers wanted to buy solutions from partners, so we launched the CSP program. Now, you'll see that in a lot of these slides, they reference it as the cloud agreement. That's how it's referenced in all our terms and conditions. So just if you're ever looking through any of our terms, you won't see CSP, you'll see the cloud agreement. So I think you can see from this, a new customer coming to Microsoft, or even an existing customer looking to purchase from Microsoft, it's very confusing. There's not an obvious path to take, some certain offers, some don't have those offers. It's a very confusing experience from our perspective. So the first part of this digital transformation is actually having one digital agreement that's dynamically generated based off what they purchase. So whichever route they choose to buy down, whichever route they choose to go down, actually having one electronic agreement that's based off what they're actually buying, rather than having them sign every single term and condition Microsoft have every time they choose to buy through one of these agreements. Because we have loads of customers at the moment who are buying through multiple of these agreements, and they're having to sign the same agreement terms, massive 120-page documents, just slightly different in wording. So that's the first step in this process. The second bit is that actually every single one of these programs has its own pricing mechanism. So at the moment they're all worked out, it's crazy to believe, but they're all worked out by different teams in Microsoft. So what quite often happens, and I'm sure you guys have experienced this before when selling to your customers, you'll go to sell something on CSP only to get the customer to tell you it's cheaper WebDirect or it's cheaper through the open program. And the reason being is that they're all worked out by different teams. So although each team has given us near enough same directive, some will come out slightly more expensive, some will come out cheaper. There's no parity, causing an absolute confusion. And quite often meaning that customers are actually choosing which route they buy down based off where they can get it cheaper. Not what's right for them, not which program's going to support their growth aspirations, but actually, where can I get it cheapest for? And we all know that's probably at the heart of most FD's conversation when looking at software. So I think, again, you can see where this is going. The plan here is to have actually one set of pricing that is identical no matter which way they buy. And we've already started doing these changes. So October 2016, you will have seen that we removed waterfall pricing for Azure. So all Azure pricing was leveled back to RRP. Now we do still have some customers under the enterprise agreement who are still running at that old pricing, but once their term comes up to end, they'll obviously roll onto the new pricing. Probably be a bit of a shock to them, but that's Azure. And then you also would have seen in October, this had quite a lot of press attention, we started to remove the boundaries of levels on Open, MPSA and EA with the intention of realigning them to CSP. Now CSP was always launched at the right pricing, it was built on the modern platform, so it's at the right place. A lot of this strategy is about taking those legacy agreements and changing them so that they fit into this whole model, so it's all the same across the board. So we've already removed level A from EA, and it's safe to say that in the next in the next FY, you'll see that we'll remove all the other levels underneath that agreement. Now, the reason for that, fundamentally, is that Microsoft used to design their programs based off how many desktops you had within your organization. So if you were a large organization with thousands of desktops, you'd automatically qualify for a cheaper pricing. Doesn't matter what you're buying. If you were a smaller organization, you'd get more expensive pricing, no matter what you were buying. Now, obviously, in the cloud world, with Azure customers being typically quite small in a lot of cases when they're cloud first, but spending a fortune on cloud services, that doesn't fit. So what you're going to see is that rather than having this level system, you're going to see more promotions, which are based off what is our model we're trying to push, so things like Microsoft 365, and they'll get beneficial pricing based off the amount of that go-to-market, that lead product that we're trying to sell. So promotions are already available in CSP. You probably won't have touched on them yet, only because of the fact that we've only done marketing contacts for Dynamics, which is quite niche. But in the new FY, you will see Microsoft 365 brought to that as well. And that will be available on Enterprise Agreement as well as CSP. So there won't be any difference between the two. You won't have customers saying, I'm going to get a better deal under this Enterprise Agreement because of the level B, C, D. It will be based off what they buy, and it will be which program's right for them. And one of the final stage to this, or the penultimate stage to this, is also having those offers available across the program. So if I populate this slide quickly, you'll see that as we've brought our subscriptions to market, quite often what's happened is some programs have ended up with none of the new subscriptions, some have ended up with the new subscriptions, but not the old ones, and quite often it means that customers are being forced to buy through multiple programs to get what they want. So a good example being Select Plus, there's only on-premise software available on that. There's a lot of government customers who still buy Select Plus based off the framework, but to buy online services, they then have to open a separate agreement through one of the other motions to get there. Now, cloud agreement, I have only got on there at the moment online services in Azure, but in reality, we've already started that push to bring on-prem to that agreement. So we have SQL Server, Windows Server, and also RDS, and in the next FY, we have a very aggressive roadmap to bring the rest of the subscriptions to that model as well. Meaning that, again, I think we see where we're going with this, but the idea is that customers will then buy based off where the value is, rather than where can I get a certain subscription, where is this subscription available, which quite often led them to buy for an enterprise agreement because of its capabilities. And the first example of this that I can share is the reserve instances and service subscriptions, which you would have seen come to CSP. Now, from a customer perspective, although I appreciate they're different from how you guys are built, depending on which model it goes through, from a customer perspective, reserve instances look identical. They're priced at the same price point. The customer buys for 1 to 3 years. They do it within their portal. They provision and use it the same way. And that's the way that all of the subscriptions we're going to bring to these programs in the future are going to look. So you shouldn't have that issue with them going down one particular program because of what's available. And the final stage of this process, no shock to any of you in the room, I'm sure. At the moment, if you're purchasing through multiples of our agreements, you'll know that actually you're having to use multiple portals to manage that entitlement. So if you're buying through an enterprise agreement, you have the VLSC. If you're buying through an MPSA, you've got the store for business. If you're buying through CSP, you'll have the partner portal. There are multiple different portals to manage that, meaning that for an IT manager, getting an actual effective license position is near impossible. Especially if someone leaves the organisation, you forget the login details. A lot of the support requests we deal with are where someone's left and suddenly they're trying to scrape around to find out where they might have licenses. But it quite often leaves the customer losing money because they're losing entitlement. So the plan with this is actually to bring one clear set of portals across the board. And that will be for deploying and managing those resources, but also for managing the costs and billing. Now what we say when we mean that is there's 3 portals we've designed. One is the store for business, which you guys will know as the Office 365 admin portal at the moment. That will become the customer's only portal for managing their entitlement, apart from the CSP portal you might prepare for them, but the APIs will link through to this. This will allow them to deploy users, deploy images, no longer needing the SCCM because it will be based off autopilot technology, and it will also allow them to manage all of their entitlements no matter which route they chose to buy through. So as we start to retire legacy programs, that data will start to become available to them within this new Store for Business portal. It is available on the line. It is very basic at the moment, but I would encourage you, if you haven't seen it already, just to have a quick look. You can Google Store for Business, or Bing, sorry, I probably should say, Store for Business, and actually see what it looks like. But we're slowly moving towards that. From a partner perspective, you'll have Partner Center, and also the APIs will enable whoever you're purchasing through, like Grey Matter, to enable all those features through the Grey Matter portal you're using. What that means is that if you're coming up against a customer that's purchased legacy agreements, you'll start to see that information within that portal as well. So you'll be able to actually look at that intelligently and show the customer what the right path is to move to CSP or the customer agreement, which we'll talk about in a minute. So all of that will become simplified. And another big problem we have is that as Microsoft, we don't have one field portal that allows us to see all of our own agreements. I know it sounds crazy, but what it quite often means is, like in the example of CSP, the inside seller will be reluctant to allow it to go CSP based off the fact they won't get visibility. They have to rely on the partner to tell them what's being billed. Well, we've already released the first iteration of this called Quote Center, and our inside sellers can now see no matter which route it goes down. So if it goes down the CSP route, no longer will they worry about it because they'll still see that revenue flowing through and they get paid on all revenue, regardless of which route it goes down. So it should encourage that being more open to whatever's right for the customer. So putting this all into one slide, you've got the modern commerce platform on the left, which is the portals we talked about, the offers which are available. They'll be through 3 key go-to-markets. So you'll have partner assisted, which is the CSP program as you know it now. We'll continue to invest in that and bring more subscriptions, more services to that to make it parallel to the other programs. You also have the self-serve. That is web direct. It's retail pricing. It's 100%. There's no partner support, so probably still for your 1 to 2 man band organizations. And then you'll have the Microsoft assisted motion, which is enterprise agreement as you would have known it before, but about to talk about this in a second, is now going to be the customer agreement moving forward. And the key here is actually that the partner value, the value you guys can deliver, these programs have been designed so that you can wrap your services around all of them, rather than being set to LSP only being able to sell EA, CSP being more for those managed service providers. It's about whoever's providing that service will now be able to be recognised on that. And I'll talk about that in a second when I talk about the customer agreement. And then again, key to this is that there'll be one Microsoft agreement for all of these 3 ways to buy. So whichever route the customer chooses, whether or not they want to buy through CSP, historically they would have had to sign the cloud agreement alongside your terms. Once they've signed this one agreement, once we've gone through that process, you don't need to worry about anything from a Microsoft perspective. The customer can buy through whichever route they need to buy through. It's all done. So you just give them your terms and conditions. From a Microsoft perspective, they've signed that one evergreen dynamic agreement. Cool. So just before I move on to the customer agreement, any questions on this? So this is our overall strategy for the next 3 to 5 years. So all the big changes you'll hear coming every FY, as they've been coming quite fast, will all be linked back to this strategy. Sure.
This one agreement you're referring to, does it apply to all levels of partnership with Microsoft?
So this is just between the customer. Oh, so you're on about the partner agreement here? Yeah. So the partner agreement will be, yes.
All levels.
Yes. Yeah. It will include that. So the way these agreements work, because they're electronic, what we can do is we can put the base terms to every single partner or every single customer, depending on which one it is, and then we can just layer on the additional dynamic terms based off what the partner is, what the partner does, what accreditations they have. And those can just be electronically added at any point. So say you guys get another accreditation for something, we can just send you a copy of that electronic, you can electronically acknowledge it, and it will just backfill into that agreement. Makes it a bit more simple than going through the old written process. Sure.
What's the biggest differentiating factor between Microsoft Assisted and partner?
Okay, good question. So partner-led at the moment is obviously your go-to for a customer who needs that fully managed solution. So they need a partner to manage their billing, their provisioning. Actually, quite often, a lot of our most successful CSP partners do everything. They just give one bill to the customer. That's really the market for most people who are new to cloud. For most organizations that don't have a massive IT team that can manage all of it themselves. The Microsoft Assisted motion, very similar to how the enterprise agreement works now, is really there for those large organizations that have large internal teams to manage most of the day-to-day runnings, but actually need a partner for certain workloads. Additionally to that, there's a lot of those really large enterprise customers who need specific terms from Microsoft.
So are you going to have a number of seat limits on it? Or
There won't be a seat limit, so I'll talk about this when we go to the customer agreement. But effectively, the way that I look at it is... Yeah, they won't be on this. No. But the pricing's the same. So the reason we had a limit before was because actually, if you met that limit, you'd get a cheaper pricing for doing that. Now it's all based on promotion. So even if they buy through CSP, and that's right for them, they'll get the same promotions as they bought through an enterprise agreement. Yep.
What would be the benefit for enterprise company I work with going through CSPs anymore at all?
In what respect?
Well, if they've got an IT
Yeah.
infrastructure, etc.
Okay. So the main point of that agreement is that actually... Okay, fair point. I mean, the pricing is the same, the solution is the same, there is no difference apart from the fact that with CSP you're completely managing that solution. Now through that Microsoft Assisted motion, just like today, if they're not a managed customer, which the majority of our customers are now that we've done that red tape out of the building, they won't have any support. So if they'd like to buy through that motion, that's fine. They're not going to have anyone to phone up to help them with that solution. They're not going to have anyone to drive that service. They're not going to have anyone there when there's an issue. They'll have to go through standard unless they purchase Azure support plans or something like that, which can come at a great cost. So the way we look at that is we don't see any of our enterprise, we don't really see any of the CSP customers unless they're managed, really looking at going down that route. If they're receiving a good service from the partner, why would they look to get rid of that service to buy the same thing for the same price for the same solution? I think the key thing here is that with this, the really large EA customers, we've got a lot of them, they have specific terms, legal terms that have been built over a number of years with Microsoft. And because that contract's direct, we can change those terms to do that. Through CSP, the terms are between us and the partner, so you guys, or through Grey Matter and then through you, and then you dictate those terms. So in some situations, like the FSI, yeah. Which is the right route there, yeah. Cool. Sure.
In terms of the agreement, how does that work if you're on multi-territory? So we're in the UK, this and Ireland.
So it is multi-geo, the agreement. At the moment, I'm about to talk about the customer agreement, but at the moment it's only been launched for the new version of this. So we haven't actually started yet looking at the other areas, and that's something when it goes to CSP, we'll have to look at how we bring it to that. It'll have to have, I mean, with CSP, it is just the cloud agreement element. So actually, most of it is just that one part of that agreement which they'll need. Through the Microsoft Assisted motion, just like the EA, there is a multi-territory amendment. So they can just add the territories for the territories they need to that agreement. And that's the way that EA works at the moment. They just layer those territories on top of that agreement. And if they're in multiple regions, there will be specific terms for those regions. So, France might have specific terms for those that need to be in there if they're then buying it through France. Germany, the same thing, depending on legislation. Sure, sorry, I think you're first.
So you said about the aggressive stuff coming to the roadmap for CSP. How public is that? When are we going to know when we can buy things?
So I would take it as, so perpetual software in its entirety without software assurance is being on pilot with our top disties at the moment. That is due to come in the first quarter of the FY. I don't have a definitive date yet, so I can't tell you. Software itself, there is a roadmap of coming throughout the new FY. Now that roadmap's being sealed down in May, so I'm in Seattle in May to find out that engineering roadmap. What I would say is stay very close to all the communications, especially like through the likes of Grey Matter, because we will give that information as soon as we have that engineering roadmap. But the intention is that, like I say, it will be aggressive. We already know we were trying to get it in this FY. It didn't happen because we turned our focus to Azure. But there is a team set just working on those subscriptions. So the intention is that all on-premise software should be there by the end of the FY. Now, we're Microsoft and I know what we're like, so I'm not going to promise that to you. But that's the intention. So that's what we're working towards. The reason software takes a bit longer to get to it and we have to slowly transition it is because we're not doing software assurance anymore. We're doing certain benefits for certain products. We're kind of reforming those products to actually include the rights that they need most rather than having a blanket software assurance. So it's a bit more of a slow burner, whereas the perpetual we can bring at once. Sure.
Hi, yeah, we've got a client who's based in Singapore, and they want to purchase Azure through us, through CSP, but I don't think we can because it's not available through Singapore, the CSP program.
So you're limited to territory, depending on where your territory is being signed up to.
Is there a reason for that, or a plan to?
We have looked at global authorization as an option. That I don't understand the ins and outs of it, but there's some legal complication with that as to why we haven't been able to bring it to market right now. We have looked at it. What I would say is, if they're only in Singapore, then unless you have authorization in that area right now, you're not going to be able to sell to them. If they have another tenant within the EU territory, so even if their headquarters is in Singapore, you can provision those services on that EU tenant, you'll be able to transact through it, and they can use those services in any organisation, any country.
You're saying they just need a legal entity somewhere?
Yes, it's the transaction piece that is linked to the territory, not the actual use of the services.
I just want an extra option, and sorry to Grey Matter, but this is kind of another technical option, which is that a customer could potentially go through the sub-service option and you could then attach the digital model.
Or the customer agreement, which we're about to talk about, because that has global authorization. So we'll talk about, Try to be careful about what we say here, but need like a sign at the back to shut up. Was there any? Sorry, before I skip over, was there any other questions about the strategy itself? So what I'm going to go through now is actually the customer agreement. So you would have heard this in the press, I'm sure, because it was quite a big announcement. Quite wrongly, shall I add, because Ciaran got it completely wrong, unfortunately. But I'm going to go through that now, and this is fundamentally applying this strategy to the enterprise agreement. So actually starting to make it so that it's all about value, about how we've talked about, same pricing, same service, same way it's purchased, all about value, and also about the fact that it's not just locked to LSPs anymore. Actually, this is something that anyone who's providing services can get involved with as well. So I guess when we look at the EA specifically, the program itself was actually designed 25 years ago, and it fundamentally hasn't changed in terms of the written paperwork that's signed, the 150 plus document that has to be written and scanned in to send to Microsoft hasn't changed. But that was around when we had that PC count and volume, and the way that customers purchased was very much down that kind of route. Fast forward 7 to 8 years, cloud services start to make an introduction, and in a bid to get them to market as quick as possible for our enterprise customers, we just brought it back to the EA agreement. So we just layered it on top of that old process that was built 25 years ago. What this results in now is that actually Azure, far from being a small part of our business, is now massive, and actually we have massive growth aspirations for it, meaning that that 25-year-old written process, scanning in 125 pages, passing it to another team physically, storing it, filing it, signing another form, filing it then to the finance team in Dublin, just doesn't work. And it's not fit for purpose in a cloud age where customers expect to be able to buy and provision and use it then, just like AWS. So this is kind of the first iteration of the Microsoft customer agreement we've talked about. In short, what this agreement is, it's an 11-page document which includes all the terms for what the customer wants to buy through the enterprise agreement. Now, at launch, this is only going to include Azure. So at the moment, it's 11 pages of Azure terms and conditions. But this will support the flexible geos, all the segmentation, and any amendments which they need within that agreement. It's electronic, it's 11 pages. Now, in terms of its initial availability, highlight this bit. It is available to anyone that's in a commercial market as of now for SMC customers. So we've already started selling these agreements, customers coming to Microsoft and purchasing these. And we have started to add more enterprise level empowerment to the agreement. Now, the hard cut-off for anyone buying Azure-only server cloud enrollments, or EAs, is the 1st of October. So if their renewal is after the 1st of October, at that point, they will then need to have the conversation about CSP or this new customer agreement. Now, the way that the actual plan works in terms of Azure through this new version of the enterprise agreement, this customer agreement, is they get provisioned an Azure plan. Now, once the Azure plan is provisioned, it's a $0 SKU, and they literally pay monthly. They get invoiced by Microsoft off whatever they consume within that month, very similar to CSP. So there is no price locking like there used to be, no 3-year price locking like they would have had before, so they might have chosen that over CSP. It's identical to the way in which CSP works. Now, if the customer needs price locking, then reserve instances are there available for CSP or this new motion. If they're ready, prepared to commit to it, they'll get that price locking capability. This is FX aligned as well, so it does mean it's aligned to the way that AWS do their pricing. It means that if the pricing benefits them 1 month, they'll get cheaper pricing. So obviously, if the pricing goes up, given the B word that's going on at the moment, they'll obviously won't benefit from that. But the good news here is that if the pricing does take a good turn 1 month, they can then purchase the reserved instances at that cheaper rate, meaning they benefit from that. And believe it or not, that was something that a lot of our cloud-first customers asked for because they were used to that with AWS. They could benefit from committing at cheaper points rather than higher points. So that's how this agreement will work. Now, in terms of how simple this is, now, on average, a lot of our large server cloud enrollments, owing to the fact that that written process was so intense, was taking on average up to 2 to 3 months to sign. And we've lost some very high-profile customers in the States, the biggest cloud consumer in the world. I'm sure you can guess who that is, because actually we were taking too long to turn around the forms. They needed specific terms. With AWS, they were used to clicking a button, having it there and then, and being able to use it. Actually, we got all excited. We're going to take 3 months to provision it, and in the background, they just went and clicked a button with AWS and started consuming, highlighting why this agreement is not right. Now, this is all provisioned directly through a portal now. So once this Azure plan is submitted to the customer, once they've accepted those terms, digested them, they're free to start consuming immediately, rather than waiting for forms to be passed around, filling physical forms out. It's all electronically signed. So to show you how that works, as an example of a walkthrough from a customer perspective, this is our quote center internally at Microsoft. So they've gone together, they've put that Azure plan, the customer said, looked at CSP, I've looked at the customer agreement, the customer agreement's right for me for whatever reason. It might be amendments, it might be that actually they're quite comfortable managing what they've got. They send out this link. They'll get this email. This email will allow them to view the proposal, so they can sign into the store for business and then view the proposal. On the right-hand side here, you'll see that there's a link to the customer agreement. They can click on that and see electronically all of the agreement terms that have been put together by that inside seller. At launch, it's based off whatever they had before in their enterprise agreement, but that will include things like multi-geo or ISV hoster amendments or things like that, which might be required for what they're doing. If they're happy with that, they can download those terms. They can then hit checkout. Now, if they're not happy, they go back to the inside seller and say, I need this term in there, I need to negotiate this term, and we go through that process again. Once that's done, they get to the billing section where they can either select the billing profile we have on file, so anything they're using that current tenant. If they haven't got a current tenant, they can create one at this process, and then they can select that from the drop-down, accept that plan, and then complete the account setup. What that does is then sends them a confirmation by email with a link to the Azure environment where they can then set up and start consuming. So this, on average, when we've been doing these agreements, takes from 10 to 15 minutes to do rather than a month to 3 months to turn around from a Microsoft perspective, meaning that the customer can get on consuming immediately rather than going through a lengthy process that's more focused on terms and conditions, pricing, and things like that. It also means from a partner perspective, you can then get involved straight away with managed service and consumption rather than worrying about a very intense transaction piece because of all the paperwork that's there. And historically, that's where our LSPs fitted. So just to talk a little bit as well about how our inside sellers handle this process. So when it comes up for renewal quota, as it does now, so this is no different to how it works now, our renewal team will contact them. So it's either the European lead generation team if it's an unmanaged customer, or it's our account exec if it is a managed customer in that instance with a CE attached. They will talk to the customer about the fact their renewal is coming up as they do now. At that point, they'll say, if it's past the 1st of October, unfortunately, you cannot renew your server cloud enrollment or your Azure-only EA agreement, meaning you need to look at either CSP or going down this Microsoft customer agreement route. If the customer says, I'm already engaged with a partner and CSP is the right motion for us, great, they can click that in the portal, commit, they close off it for quota. So actually the process is a lot shorter for the inside seller. So if you think they've got a quota to close off these renewals, if a partner's already done the legwork and sold the CSP agreement, they can click submit, done. What that means is the revenue they start seeing on that portal, and again, they get paid on whatever's consumed, just like they do with CSP or through this customer agreement, so it makes no difference to them. If the customer says they're not happy with CSP or there's a particular reason they would like an enterprise agreement or the historic legacy version of the enterprise agreement, they will speak to them about the customer agreement, in which case they'll go through this process before closing it off for quota. Now the bit I don't have screenshots of is that at the end of this process, the inside seller has to attach a partner. So they have to either say, who is your incumbent? If the customer says they've got a managed service incumbent, fine, close it off their quota. If they don't, they have to push them to find a partner tool, which is what is used through CSP at the moment for referrals, for them to then select the partner they want to work with. So that's the way the provisioning works. I'll talk about how you guys get aligned to it and how you get recognised for the revenue in a second. So just talking about the roadmap for this. So as I mentioned, this was launched on the 1st of March as an option to customers. We have approximately 5 in the UK. It is Azure only that's being targeted at the moment. So for customers buying a desktop EA that's got Azure on there, they won't be targeted right now. They'll be able to continue to renew until a later date. It's Azure only, and server cloud enrollments. And we're continuing to add additional capabilities to this. If they're using a legacy server cloud enrollment or EA and they've got workloads, within this process there's a button just to transition it into this new agreement. We will look to in the future, so in the new FY there are plans to bring Microsoft 365 to this, Dynamics 365 and really all of our cloud offerings, so bringing this up to par, and we'll slowly remove those from the enterprise agreement. So the enterprise agreement will slowly transfer into this agreement until we're left with just this customer agreement and the CSP option, depending on which one the customer wants to choose. Now, the other thing I just want to allude to, which is coming down the line, and I don't have all the details yet, but you will find out in the new FY, is as part of this aggressive roadmap for CSP, we are bringing what we're calling modern Azure to CSP. And what that means is we're bringing the enterprise portal capabilities to CSP in the new FY. Meaning that that full third-party marketplace becomes available, all of the services that are available through Azure on the enterprise agreement will be made available, and also all of that billing and cost management will also be made available through that portal as well at RRP. So we are doing a lot of effort to bring these up to par next to each other. What that would also mean is that a migration will be possible between the two at a click of a button. So modern to modern, back and forward, won't be an issue. If a customer decides the customer agreement is no longer suitable for them, they want to go down to TSP, they can put a request in, it will just move, the billing will just change, and vice versa. If they decide that the partner's not giving them the support they need, they want to buy direct from Microsoft, they'll have that option. One thing to clear up, which Ciaran did pick up in their article, was they said that Microsoft, I think it was Microsoft has taken the SMB business direct. This is a change to our enterprise agreement customers that are already billing direct with us. It was just that the LSP used to handle the transactions, the paperwork for us. This is a change just to those. We don't see any CSP customers, unless they're receiving a really bad service, wanting to move to this new motion because they're receiving the same pricing, the same offers, and as long as they're getting provided support, there is no reason for them to transition into this, apart from maybe those legal contract purposes. So just to clear that a bit up.
Just to say one bit,
Yeah.
you mentioned is the ability for customers to transact ISP solutions that are in the marketplace on CSP. So that's sort of a great opportunity to those of you that are ISPs to getting your solutions into the Microsoft marketplaces. This opens up an entirely channel as opposed to what was historically just through mentioning, but actually through CSP as well.
I think we're already in Azure Marketplace app stores will automatically transition to CSP.
You need to select the box, don't you?
So at the moment, certain ones are available now in the old, what we're calling the old CSP Azure portal. You can select a box and provision them. But when we bring this enterprise portal in the new FY, everything that's available, the way that you provision them on an enterprise agreement, so you just select it in the portal and you start purchasing it, will become available for the same way in CSP.
Everything that's
Yep.
in Azure,
Exactly.
marketplace.
Yep. It will be the same portal, the identical portal. Which is why we can then enable that transition as well, because it's the same portal, it's just changing where the billing's directed. So there we go, you'll automatically be available if this is already an opportunity.
Can I ask I'm absolutely new to all of this.
Sure, no worries, I'm sorry then, apologies. Show you the bureaucracy of Microsoft.
So you've got 3 routes. So
Yeah.
if they go down what used to be the enterprise agreement route,
The Microsoft customer agreement, yeah.
Legal contract, you send them an invoice, they pay.
Yep.
Right, okay. Go down the self-service route, they stick a credit card on it.
So, yep, that's it, yep.
So the CSP route, what actually happens mechanically? They sign this legal agreement. Does then grey matter then?
We bill grey matter. So our contract is between us and grey matter. Grey matter's got a contract with you guys if you're buying through grey matter. We bill grey matter for whatever's provisioned at whatever point, but we have, apart from the actual usage or what they are entitled to as that service, we have no agreement with the customer. So it's completely managed by you.
Have control over what's turned on and turned off.
Yep.
They don't have the ability to turn stuff on and off.
Unless you enable it for them. Yeah, unless you enable that for them. You can choose to make it available to them, but as default, you get given the management rights to those portals, so you can stop them from...
It's purely getting the legal agreement signed and then moving on from there.
Yeah. And you own that contract, so whatever you put in it, it's completely up to you. Microsoft aren't involved. Whereas if they go down the customer agreement route, which is one of the reasons customers do go down that route, is because if they need specific legal terms that you might not be able to accommodate, then that's the route to get those terms and conditions.
Is there any mechanisms in place to basically prevent the company in the middle from basically being completely financially ruined by a customer, like spinning up thousands and thousands of dollars worth of consumption and then simply not paying?
So simply put, in that contract, we will, if that distributor who we're working with, so Grey Matter in this example, there is a clause in there where we will turn off the services for them, so they won't be able to provision any new services. The customer's left untouched, and then we'll get in touch with the customer if it gets to that point and say, you need to look at another route.
You were saying the other way.
I'm saying
the customer was just to run up a massive.
Yeah, so the customer, i.e. the person you don't have an agreement with.
No, that's your liability. Hence why, if the customer, if you need that, you want Microsoft to take that liability, especially in those really large deals, that's where the customer agreement's right for you. And you can still be linked to that, which I'm just about to talk about, so you can still be approved for that. So say you get recognised from a Microsoft perspective on what's being billed on that, because you're driving the consumption, but the invoicing, the chasing of credit, all that kind of stuff is down to Microsoft.
The thing I'd say on that actually is if you still want to provision through CSP, you want to minimise that exposure, you have the full rights to bill your customer any way you want, whatever frequency of the front. So if you're concerned that it's a credit risk or you just want to pass that risk on to the customer, then you could potentially just build that into your contract where you bill them up front, or cap their usage potentially and monitor it using the tools.
Yeah, a lot of our CSP partners use it. I mean, they use the fact that they can turn off the service at any point as kind of a, I don't know if it's a carrot or whip is the right terminology, but they use that to kind of say, look, if you don't pay, we'll turn off your data center. So that is widely used by a lot of our partners anyway, but again, that's your contract, so as long as your contract's solid enough, that's fine. But if you didn't want to take the liability, then that's why there's a Microsoft assisted route. They've got the two options.
Yeah, just building on guys' point, we have the ability to cap it, and you have the recognise these historically to say if you want to cap consumptions and you don't spend foreign amounts of money on that, then that's fine. We've actually something that David was going to show briefly is our service view tool. We actually enable you to view your consumption and manage that better.
Yeah, I guess it's more a question of, I mean, obviously their consumption is great as long as they're paying.
Yeah.
So if they suddenly start accelerating their consumption, which is a way for proactive monitoring of that, so we can go, hey, do you know, by the way,
Yeah, so that's what essentially this service view tool will enable you to use it.
And the great news is with us bringing the enterprise portal capabilities, the APIs will be even stronger for that, which means Grey Matter's tool will become even more intelligent based off what we're allowing them to access in our portal, meaning that actually that analysis becomes a lot easier.
Yeah.
So at the moment, what a lot of customers like about the enterprise agreement is there's very granular data, which Grey Matter's tool obviously provides, but they also have things like clouding built into it, which allows you to have some intelligent things like, by the way, you can turn this off at night to save this money, by the way, do you know this is spinning up and not doing anything, that kind of stuff, and that will be built into CSP and through Grey Matter's tool.
oh, I see, yeah, because I've seen the invoices where you just get going, like, who's this for?
Yeah, so something that they will run through hopefully for them if they best context.
Yeah.
Sure.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Is there an alignment between the Microsoft agreement with the distributor and that and the CSP agreement between the distributor and reseller?
In what respect, sorry?
Or just an alignment between the two agreements just to make sure there are no conflicts? So So that obviously they're independent agreements, but I mean,
Do you mean from what you mean what the customers are signing with Microsoft compared to what you're signing with the customer?
yeah. So well, simply put, the agreement that you have, say with Greymaster,
Yeah.
Greymaster's agreement with the reseller.
Yeah.
Is there some alignment between the two?
The honest answer is it's completely up to Greymatter what they put in their terms. That's the kind of purpose of CSP. But obviously you're agreeing those terms with Greymatter, so before you sign them, you can obviously
So there's
have
this
that
standard
negotiation.
terms of Microsoft, but also in terms of the value that we add to that as well. We've got our terms in such as technical support, things like that. But as you say, a contract is not something that's set in stone. It's a point of discussion, so they can be amended to suit.
That's fundamentally the key difference
So it
between.
would
Yeah.
make sense that if it's flowing from top down, that Greymatter don't enter some crazy agreement with their resellers that have nothing.
Honestly, they can. Yeah, they could do that if they wanted to. They'd be well within their rights. It's
Yeah.
it is. Yeah, but I get what you mean.
Have you met our legal people?
Yeah, I mean, if they did, I'm not sure. I'm sure that'd get out quite quickly. But I mean, our terms of Greymatter are very basic. It's literally like, this is the price of the service we charge you. This is how it works. You're supporting it. Very simply put, that is simply how it works. So just to talk about, obviously, the role of the partner. So historically, I guess everyone in the room, a lot of you, although bar some of you who might have been designing your solutions in the enterprise agreement, historically wouldn't have got involved in the actual sale or transaction of the agreement because the LSP would have been the one who could only transact it. And the reason we had LSPs was because there was this huge paperwork trail which involved doing things like credit checks, filling out the forms, raising things like CPSs, ignore all those acronyms because they're going anyway. But using e-agreements, there was a lot of work they had to do in that middle aspect, which we then paid them to do. We still billed the customer directly. They just had to do that aspect. There was that pre-sales and post-sales activity, so actually helping the customer consume, but realistically the LSP was just focusing on this transaction piece in the middle, owing to the fact they became almost transactional partners. The idea of this agreement is that actually that's all automated now. That's done through that portal which I showed you at the start, meaning that actually any partner who's involved with the customer can get involved in this post-sales and pre-sales and post-sales activity. So there's no longer a need for an LSP per se. It's for any partner, that's providing a managed service or a solution to that customer. So the way that works and the way we recognise a partner for getting involved in this agreement is through what we call PAL, so Partner Admin Link. So some of you may have been familiar with DPOR, or Digital Partner of Record before, and there's a lot of acronyms, bear with me, it's Microsoft. But PAL, Partner Admin Link, is kind of a modernised version of DPOR. And what I say by modernised is that as long as you've got admin access to the customer's tenant, you can associate yourself as PAL. So the customer can control if you have access, they can control if you would get removed from PAL, but as long as you have access, you'll be recognised for what they consume underneath the customer agreement. Now, I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking that means loads of partners will go and attach themselves to this. Well, actually, 98.6% of our customer base have one or less partner attached to their admin centre. The reason being is that's fundamentally their data. So unless you're providing a managed service, there's no way in hell they can give you access to that data. It's quite a precious thing. So unless there's a managed service contract in place, they're unlikely to do it. Now, if you are delivering those services, we'd expect to be, in order to be able to deliver those services, that you would have access to their admin tenant. So what I would say is that historically, where a lot of these deals would have been transacted by an NSP, but actually in the background, there might have been a managed service provider. One of you guys might have been doing services for that customer, but really the one we were recognising and paying was the LSP because they were transacting it. Even though they weren't doing any services, they weren't even associated to the customer's admin centre. With this change, if the customer goes down the customer agreement route, if you've got access, it's more than likely you will be recognised and not the LSP because they won't have had access to the admin centre.
Is there a non-admin equivalent? So if we write a piece of software for somebody and they decide to take it in-house and run it themselves, is there still a way of being recognised?
You need to have some sort of role access. Now, there's different levels of role access, so it's not just one standard global admin, you have access to everything. You can limit that by subscription, you can limit by resource once you've got the link associated. So there is security features in place to do that, but you still do need to have some sort of access or we can't recognise you.
That's kind of the problem with that, isn't it? Is even if you get software that is driving consumption, and it's being deployed by the customer themselves, you've got no say, you don't get recognition of that.
It's a fair, yeah, it's a fair point. Yeah. The honest answer is we can't see a way of fixing that at the moment. What we've tried is to bring out a number of different roles to enable the customer to perhaps say, although I'm not going to give you global admin access to the whole tenant, the resource that the ISV solution is running on, you could put in your terms and conditions that particular resource, for support reasons, you need to have access to it. That's why we've locked it down to resource. But fundamentally speaking, we can't fix it. Yeah.
Can the customer send something in? So instead of setting you up to have access, could they write to Microsoft or contact Microsoft and say that they did deliver this resource?
At the moment, it's in a very basic format at the moment. So Power is very much in its infancy. So there are other things we're looking at bringing. And honestly speaking, it's the incentives teams that are looking at it. So I don't know the full picture of what they're looking at. But I know they're looking at different ways of modernising it, different ways of accessing it, because we know that customers sometimes don't understand how to add people to their portal or do that kind of work. A lot of what we've done is we've put quite a bit of funding aside for the next FY to actually broadcast to the customers that Power is the way that we can then support the ecosystem, because we can then recognise partners for the great work you're doing. So that's something that we're trying to broadcast heavily across our webpage. Powell as a blog post has already been publicised to customers, so they can see how it works, how it's associated. There is a step for step, but there is a lot more work we need to do to broadcast what it means and how important it is.
From our questions, is that digital partner record ever used by you guys to look for a potential provider to solve some of these problems? Like we just built for a FTSE top 20. They are not letting us into their Azure stack under the pain of death under any circumstances. So we're not going to get that. But it'd be really nice if you know that we're built for, because you might then bring us into a project similar for somebody else.
The honest answer is I don't know how that works. That's for OCP. Yeah, that's an OCP led.
I can probably help. I spent years in the ISV team and I'm in the startup bit now. A couple of things on it. It is really hard for us to track ISV consumption because it all comes down to how you guys are actively deploying that solution. It's SaaS. It's a lot harder than if you're deploying it straight into a customer's tenant. So your question though about being actually found as a a recommended partner to perhaps solve another customer solution. We have an initiative as part of the Microsoft Partner Network or part program is called co-sell. So I don't know if you guys have come across it, but that's more on the sell with front. So that's where you can grow your awareness as an ISV with a particular solution that can solve a pain point within a customer. There's obviously eligibility criteria with that, because Microsoft will only collaborate and co-sell with companies where perhaps we've done a verification on that. But actively now in the co-sell program, that's how we're driving the understanding of what partners sit in what solution areas, what industry, and solve what problem within those pieces for our customers. So our sales force gets an understanding of that. The other way we're driving our sales force and incentivizing them is around marketplace, and marketplace is going to become a huge part for our sales force moving forward, to find the right partners with the right solution to then drive that into their customers as well.
I'm not expecting much because I'm a tiny company.
No, it's all possible.
I am trying to work out how much being Microsoft partners are worthwhile things to market around and take.
We've been doing, as a commercial licensing team, there's a lot of work we're still doing around how we push out the ISV guidance in terms of licensing, because actually up until now, hold our hands up, it's been pretty poor in terms of what we suggest is the solution. There is some stuff I've seen in draft already that we're going to launch, which kind of help navigate that path. So saying, look, do you want to build your solution fundamentally? Then buy as a customer, not a partner, buy as a customer, build your solution, then use the multi-tenant that is available. There's your hosting amendment, which is available on either the MCA, the EA, or WebDirect. Or if you'd like to build solutions around partners, then become a CSP partner and sell them a subscription with your service in there. Or thirdly, the partner co-sell activity. There is some really good documentation I know is coming. We just haven't publicly launched it yet. It's gone through the final things, but that does clearly kind of show you a path of what's right for me as an ISV, which route do I want to take, because we need to make it a bit more defined, I think. And we know that.
And ISV embed,
Yes, and the ISV embedding program, which obviously requires you to be a direct CSP partner, which again is another thing that we're trying to deal with at the moment, so that it's not just direct partners who have access to that, that you can do it through the indirect CSP as well, so that you can lean on an indirect provider for that support aspect if you just want to focus on your ISV solution. So we are looking at exploring that as well. It's true. The reason being is, from what I've told, is that what happens is when the ISV embedded program goes in, it looks for the partner relationship. Now in the indirect model, the partner relationship is the indirect provider, not the reseller, because there's that three-prong approach. Whereas which at the moment, because it does that, the direct is the only way to enable the ISV embed.
What's the lead time on all of this?
Lead time on the whole strategy?
Well, on delivering, bulk of it, how much is it going to take?
Well, we're 2 years out of the 5-year strategy. So there's another 3 years of it. We've got to phase these approaches, especially with things like price leveling. It's quite a difficult conversation with the FX the way it is at the moment, and we're already seeing pain points for customers. We are phasing this in as best we can, but we're full steam ahead. We think that we'll begin retiring legacy programs like Open Value, all the other programs, and move to these 3 ways to buy at the end of the new FY. But as I say, that's an optimistic target. But this is due to kick off in July. So we've started Azure. That's pretty much done. We now need to move to online services and then on-premise. Cool. Any final questions? I think I'm out of time. I think I've overused the times a little bit.
Does this auto migrate if you're DPOR? You have to then go back to your
No,
client?
needs to go do PAL. The fundamental problem with DPOR was the fact that in a lot of cases the LSP transacting the agreement had a team set up to harvest the DPOR. So they'd go in there, get access and just take it off whoever was actually doing the service. With this one, it's led by the customer. It's whatever access they have. So in this case, if the LSP doesn't have access, which they don't in a lot of cases to the admin centre, they won't get PAL. So try and protect it a bit more, which is why we need to do that education piece with the customer, which we've got some money aside to do. Cool, thank you guys.